When did a crime get you promoted? When I came into work, I discovered that our plant ecosystem was about to turn toxic. I tried to warn my boss when he looked at me dismissively and said, "You're just the plant guy. Leave the mechanical stuff to our engineers." I've spent 15 years studying invasive species. I learned how they devastate the food chain from the soil up. When I saw the pale, vein-lined fronds of Hydra virilia sprouting unnaturally fast by the filtration system, I knew we had a problem. It leaches toxins into water systems to kill off competitors. The tricky part is that they make it look like natural decay. Doing that to plants is bad enough, but when humans ingest it, or if it gets into the air, it leads to some horrific burning sensation throughout the lungs and can lead to passing out or death. To most, it was just another pretty, fast-growing weed. In an enclosed hydroponic environment like Feldman's prized Agri-Lab, where college interns rotate through delicate experiments, one wrong route and the system collapses. I documented everything, collected samples. I compiled a full report and begged Feldman to quarantine Zone C. The entire facility would have been flooded with airborne toxins if we didn't. We're presenting to the grant board in 3 days, Callum. You want me to shut down half the facility because you found a leaf you don't like? The lab needed that funding, and a shutdown, even temporary, would send the wrong message. I went hired a Dr. Lomax in environmental health. She nodded politely through my presentation, then gently told me that unless there was a recorded illness or equipment failure, her hands were tied. I wanted to scream. I'd seen this before. The vine spread wasn't random. It was targeting the low traffic areas. That's how it worked. It moved unnoticed until it didn't. Feldman's lab wasn't just a research center. It was a pressure cooker, a perfect host for this kind of silent sabotage. The system was designed to circulate nutrients automatically, exactly what the vine needed to thrive. And Feldman was tunnel visioned on impressing that grant board. He didn't have time for hypothetical threats. That night, I slipped into the greenhouse and shut off the secondary pumps connected to Zone C. It would look like a malfunction, but nothing traceable. I also swapped the nutrient solution with a temporary neutral buffer to slow down the spread of the parasite. I left anonymous notes in the student lab lockers, telling them not to run any water tests that week. On the day of the big tour, it happened. 2 hours before the grant board arrived, the main filtration tanks began bubbling black sludge. Half the greenhouse lights cut out. A creeping haze settled over the crops as leaves wilted in minutes. One student fainted from fumes. The vine had penetrated the central water line. Feldman looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, but thanks to my makeshift buffer, the contamination was contained to Zone C. The rest of the lab, though shaken, was salvageable. The board was not impressed, but at least no one was hospitalized, or worse. The next morning, after the containment teams had cleared the fumes, after the last ambulance had left with a dizzy intern, Feldman walked into my office. I'd half expected him to storm in, demand answers, maybe even threaten my job for interfering with the water system, but he looked deflated. He sat down across from me, shoulders slumped. "You shut off the pumps," he said flatly. I nodded. "If you hadn't, I'd be holding a regrettable press conference instead of a clipboard." He rubbed his temples and said, "You were right. And I dismissed you because, well, honestly, I didn't think your kind of science applied here. I saw a botanist in a lab full of engineers and assumed you were just overreaching." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close enough. He told me the board was furious but not walking away, thanks to how quickly the system was contained. They were impressed by the safety protocols, my protocols, ironically. Feldman said if I'd be willing to help redesign the risk management framework, they'd fast-track funding for a full environmental analysis division. Then he offered me the position to lead the project. I took it.